Hey everyone, so I am now back in full swing with doing these chapter summaries, and we're going to get really hairy, and we are going to jump right into chapter 11, Properties of the Hair and Scalp. This chapter will build your basic foundation of what you need to know as a hairdresser, the science about how your hair behaves, different disorders and diseases that you may see, what you can work with in the salon, and what may not work. And I like that this chapter also covers the what I call the myths or the old wives' tales of hair. And not to ever correct your client, but you might hear these from a client. It's something to be mindful of because I think it's really interesting. And I'm going to call the book out on one area in here. I won't tell you what, so you'll have to watch the whole video series. But I'm going to call out one area that I know is not exactly totally true. I don't know how I'm going to break this up, but I'm going to probably go into the basic structure and then segue into types of hair loss and the myths, and we'll go from there. But anyhow, you can actually take classes on this later on after you get your cosmetology license. I know a lot of students ask about how they become a trichologist, and I don't have a direct answer. Every state is different. I know in other countries it's a lot easier, like in Australia. I watched a video and a lady told you how to be a trichologist quickly. Just for the record, a trichologist is going to be a professional that specializes in analyzing the scalp and the hair, and they can prescribe certain treatments. They can do certain, like scalp steaming treatments, special massages, and recommend certain products. It's a lot of money in trichology. Another area of career outside being behind the chair that is in this chapter is the treatment of head lice. There's actually specific salons that are trained to actually get rid of them using a special heat method. It's pretty cool stuff. So I like how the book gives you this little image in the beginning segment of how important hair is, how it says a lot about you. A lot of historical figures have had really interesting hair, as we know, from the funky 80s to Lady Godiva. So at its basic, we need to know the structure of hair. The study of hair is going to be called trichology, which comes from the Greek words trichos, hair, and ology, which means the study of. Hair is part of the integumentary system, which, if you didn't pay attention before, will also include the scale, not scales, unless you're a reptile, the skin, the nails, and the glands. The evolutionary concept of hair is supposed to provide warmth. Technically, we don't need this in this modern era because we have houses that keep us warm, or we'll just put blankets on to keep us warm as well. You want to know that a mature strand of human hair will be divided into two parts, the hair root and the hair shaft. The root of the hair is located below the surface of the epidermis, which is going to be your outer layer of skin, and the hair shaft is the portion of the hair that projects above the epidermis. Now, this is an important part because when I hear my young students, when they first start cosmetology, especially if it's the adult program, they'll say, oh, I have to touch my roots up. And after we cover this chapter, I go, so you're going to dig up your scalp and then color your roots, and then remember, oh, it's regrowth. We actually never color the actual root of the hair. What we're coloring is the hair shaft, the regrowth that comes from the scalp. Our roots are right tight in the follicle. They do not get affected by the hair dye and the hair bleach. Both of those products are not strong enough to go down there and actually color it. So it's some pretty cool science behind that. You'll also know that the hair shaft that comes out from the scalp, the first half inch, is very weak. It's not as keratinized, so it is more prone to damage. It also will lift faster. That's why when we apply virgin color or virgin bleach, we never apply to the roots first, like I've seen on a lot of the YouTube videos of non-professionals failing. What you'll see in those videos is they get super light here and then everything else is really yellow. The reason being is because we have heat from our scalp as being one reason, and the other theory is that when the hair is not as keratinized, it's easier for the color to lift. That's why you'll see some of the advanced color videos use a lower level developer for the regrowth, and then they'll use a higher level of color for the mid-shaft and ends. So you want to know that the structures of a hair root, there's going to be 5 main structures, and practice this in your Cengage with labeling. The 5 main structures of the hair root are going to be the hair follicle, hair bulb, dermal papilla, erector pili muscle. Everyone laughs at the erector pili muscle, so get it out of your system now before you go to class and really annoy us teachers. And sebaceous oil glands. So in detail, the hair follicle is going to be the tube-like depression or pocket in the skin that holds the hair root. It's just going to be a little area like this, and your bulb is going to go right in there. Your hair shaft will grow out of it. That's where all the magic is going to happen. You'll have hair follicles all over the body except for the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet. So you'll notice, like near your fingers, there's finer hair. Around our lips, if you're a female, might be finer hairs. If you're a male, thicker. But we have hair follicles all over our body. The follicle will extend downward from the epidermis into the dermis, where it surrounds the dermal papilla. Occasionally, you'll actually have more than one follicle growing out of the hair, and if you're a male, you'll typically see this in your arm or leg. It's really cool when you see that, and there's 2 thick hairs. And this book doesn't go into it. The older version actually had a really neat chapter. What happens is when you have 2 follicles growing out of this, not 2 follicles, 2 hair growing out of the single follicle, what will happen is one will take over and it almost will like parasitize this one, so there's a weaker one and then it falls out, or they both die. It's really interesting how that happens. If you ever plucked it, you'll see how it has like this really weird looking anatomy. The next part is the hair bulb. This is going to be the lowest part of the hair strand. It is thickened, club shape, and it forms the lower part of the hair root. The lower part of the hair bulb fits and covers the dermal papilla. The dermal papilla, and the plural is dermal papillae, that means more than one, is a small cone-shaped elevation located at the base of the hair follicle that fits in the hair bulb. The dermal papilla contains the blood and nerve supply and provides the nutrients needed for growth. Some people will refer to the dermal papilla as the mother of the hair because it will nourish it. The dermal papilla is also, the area because when you rip the hair out of it, those nerves attached to it are going to signal the pain. So when you're waxing, that's something to just think about. It's pretty cool. Now, the erector pilae muscle, or what they call the erectors, is a small involuntary muscle in the base layer of the hair follicle. Strong emotions or a cold sensation cause it to contract, which will make the hair stand straight up and result in goosebumps. So the muscle, if you ever feel something like you're very fearful or you're very anxious, you can almost feel like the hairs of your neck stick up. Some of you can even feel your skin tighten. That's all of your erector pilae muscles together contracting. It's incredible how our bodies work that way. And one of the most important parts of this is the sebaceous gland. This technically will keep your hair young. If you have too much of an overactive sebaceous gland, it can lead to some really nasty scalp conditions, potentially even hair loss. These are going to be the oil glands in the skin that are connected to the hair follicles, and they secrete a fatty substance known as sebum, and that will condition the hair. Sebum will lubricate the skin and the hair. What you want to do before you hop in the shower is I always recommend brushing it, stimulate those follicles, massage the scalp. That will push any sebum out and you can brush it through. There's conflicting research because some research says that it's not good to leave the sebum on your hair. Others say that it's fine. This is really where it gets to be complicated because we do not have enough modern research on this. I try to read scientific journals, and I do also want to bring up that this chapter, because a lot of my students ask where do they get the information, it's going to be this book right here, The Hair Structure and Chemistry Simplified. This was an old book that was written in the 70s, and that's where they're getting a lot of their pictures and information from. We need to get a modernized version of this out for cosmetologists so we can really, get gung-ho on the science behind this. You also want to read the little Did You Know box because it's really interesting. This is a health reason. You will hear so much health-related information in the salon, especially if you work in a salon and spa. And one of the biggest myths on health and wellness is proteins and amino acids. So you are what you eat, and this will affect your hair to an extent. There are 11 of the 20 amino acids that make up hair. The body produces 11 of the 20 amino acids that make up hair, but your daily diet must include the 9 remaining ones. So the 9 are called the essential amino acids because our body can't synthesize them. The 11 amino acids our body can synthesize are not going to be an issue if we're not getting them from our diet. But it's important to remember that our hair is protein and it is comprised of 20 amino acids. If we're deficient in just any of them, it can cause brittle hair or hair loss. That's why crash dieting and anorexia can cause lackluster hair that falls out of the scalp and is itchy. Those that are, not eating healthy, or, I've been vegan for many years, and when I started going vegan, I didn't lose any hair because I was mindful of what I was eating. It's really not a problem. To some of the young people that are doing it for a fad diet or thinking they'll just lose weight quickly and they're not eating, the plant-based alternative proteins, this is where it can affect our health and wellness. Because hair is also another way to view how healthy the body is. If your hair is falling out all at once, it's usually a sign that something is wrong, just like if our skin or nails are looking lackluster. And the reason behind that too is that, think of it like this: when you're depriving your body of nutrients, your body is not going to have any excess nutrients to essentially spend on making healthy hair, skin, and nails. Think of it like almost, if any of you are on a budget, you'll know that if you're on a budget, you're not going to spend all your money because you'll go bankrupt. If you have excess money, then you can maybe allocate some of the money to purchasing some new products or upgrading your dryer. That's how our bodies work. our calories, our energy, if we have any excess that we can spend on looking good, that's what our body puts it to, our hair, skin, and nails. So if we're eating a very healthy diet, eating healthy food, it will show on our hair, skin, and nails. So now that we covered the structures of the hair root, we want to cover the structures of the hair shaft. There's 3 main layers of the hair shaft, the hair cuticle, cortex, and the medulla. The cuticle is one of our worst enemies in coloring hair, and I say that in a loving way, because it's an overlapping layer of protein. They almost look like shingles on a roof. And the cuticle provides a barrier that protects the inner structure of the hair, and it keeps it tightly against the cortex. Now this will relate to porosity, because if our cuticles are wide open on the hair shaft, then it can increase our porosity, which is also not a good thing. That can lead to hair breakage, color fadage, and it can also cause our perms not to take well. If your cuticle is tightly drawn shut, what's going to happen is it will be resistant to color and lightener, and then you'll have to process longer. So to feel a cuticle, you want to pinch a single strand of healthy hair between your thumb and forefinger. Starting near the scalp, pull upward on the strand. The strand should feel sleek and smooth. Next, hold the end of the hair strand with one hand and then pinch the strand with the thumb and forefingers in the other hand. Move your fingers down the hair shaft. In this direction, the hair feels rough because you're going against the natural growth of the cuticle. This is an important point because this will be on your test. A healthy, compact cuticle is the hair's primary defense against damage. A lengthwise cross-section of hair, meaning they take the hair and they chop it in half, shows that although the hair cuticle scales overlap, each individual cuticle scale is attached to the cortex. These overlapping scales make up the cuticle layer. Swelling the hair by applying substances such as hair color raises the cuticle layer and opens a space between the scales, which allow liquid to penetrate in the cortex. So what that means is that if you were to take the cuticle, cross-section it, and then examine it, what you'll see is that the cuticle scales are not sitting on top of the hair, they're actually fused to the hair. So when we swell open the cuticle, it may not go all the way back down, and that, in fact, when you're coloring hair, even if the hair feels healthy, the cuticle will never go all the way back down, and that's why color fadage may be an issue. So a healthy cuticle protects the hair and prevents damage to the hair fibers, because under the cuticle in our cortex, we have all these little fibers that, keep our hair healthy. Oxidation, hair colors, permanent waving solutions, and chemical relaxers have an alkaline pH which penetrate the cuticle layer. This allows the high pH allows the cuticle to swell and open, which causes the reaction that you want. So it's damage, but it's controlled damage. And a lot of people ask me, well, are even demi-permanent colors damaging? Well, I always answer back, technically yes, anything's damaging. Even a shampoo that is very, very high in pH can be damaging. None of you may remember this, but when I was younger, I never used it on myself, thank goodness, but Prel, I've had friends that would use Prel, and that pH was so high, I've never tested it, so I wouldn't know, but I've heard stylists saying that they were realizing their natural hair was actually lightening just from the very high pH of it. The next layer of the hair is going to be the cortex, and this is the most important layer of hair. This is where all of the magic happens. This is where you have your melanin, where your bleaching is going to take place with the melanin, where you're going to lift your hair color, so we're going to change the protein bonds in there if you're perming. This is going to account for about 90% of the hair's total weight. It's going to be all in the cortex. The elasticity of the hair and its natural color are going to result from the unique protein structures in the cortex. Changes involved in wet setting, thermal styling, permanent waving, chemical relaxing all take place within the cortex. So the cortexes are fibers in there, and there's also some additional anatomy that we're just learning about that's in the cortex. And the last part of the hair shaft is going to be the medulla. So not everyone has a medulla. I know that I certainly don't. Typically very straight hair has a medulla. This is going to be the innermost layer of hair, and it's composed of round cells. It's very common in very fine, naturally blonde hair to naturally lack a medulla. Generally, only thick, coarse hair contains a medulla. I think I might have said that wrong. So no, I would have a medulla. It would be hair that is very fine, won't have a medulla, but there's some issues with that. We don't know for sure, and I've read interesting research on this. We're really not sure what the purpose of the medulla is. Some think of the medulla as giving volume, hence why curly hair is a little bit thicker. Also, if you look at your beard and mustache hair, those hairs are a little bit thicker, and they do have a medulla. The medulla is not. This even says right here, all male beard hair contains a medulla. The medulla is not involved in salon services because if you think about it like this, I had someone that was really concerned. She was asking about what would happen if, she were to damage her medulla, and I'm like, well, technically your hair might not have a medulla, and I said it's not a problem. If you're worried about damaging medulla, we have bigger problems because you damage that medulla, your hair would be long melted way before that. That just puts things in perspective. So make sure you look at the hair anatomy. It's pretty interesting stuff. They have a better version of this in the texture services, I believe. So I'm going to start talking a little bit about the chemical composition of hair, and then I'm going to give you guys a 5-minute break. So the hair is going to be comprised of protein that grows from cells originating within the hair follicle. That's where it begins. So the journey of a piece of hair maturing is going to be called keratinization. So when hair starts to grow, they're very soft, and as these newly formed cells mature, they fill up with a fibrous protein called keratin. Once they start filling with keratin, the cells will move upward, lose their nucleus, and die. That's why hair is not living. So if I cut a piece of hair from here, I'm not going to feel any pain because there is no pain. If I rip a piece of hair out, I'm going to feel it because there's the erector pili muscle, and the nerve attached to it will send a pain response to my brain. That kind of puts things in perspective a little bit. The hair shaft that emerges is a non-living fiber composed of keratin protein. Hair is approximately 90% protein. The protein is made up of long chains of amino acids, which in turn are made up of elements. There's going to be 5 major elements they call cons, and that's going to be carbon, which is the majority of the elements that's in normal hair. It accounts for about half the hair, 51%. Oxygen, 21% of the human hair has oxygen. Hydrogen, 6% of human hair has oxygen. Nitrogen, 17% of human hair has nitrogen, and sulfur. So it's going to be that little chart right there that talks about it. Proteins are made of long chains of amino acid. And what amino acids are is they're building blocks of proteins. They are joined together like little beads. The strong chemical bonds that join amino acids is a peptide bond, also known as an N bond, and a long chain of amino acids linked by peptide bonds is called a polypeptide chain. These will form proteins, and proteins are long coiled complexes of polypeptides made of amino acids. The spiral shape of a coiled protein is called a helix. Very similar if you've taken biology, you'll know DNA has a helix. It's like a winding staircase shape. That's created when polypeptide chains intertwine with one another. It's also interesting to know, because you'll learn about when you're coloring natural hair, if you do advanced classes, that natural redheads are one of the toughest groups of hair to color, and one of the theories behind that is because they think they have more sulfur in their hair, and that becomes problematic when you're coloring. So I'm going to let you guys have a 5-minute break, and I'm going to come back to go through these side bonds of the cortex, and then we're going to segue into hair growth.